You're listening to The Frankie Files, FrankieFilesPodcast.com. Follow me on Reddit at FrankieTees and on Twitter at FrankieTees for supplemental discussion. The Frankie Files podcast is researched, written, recorded, and edited by me, Frankie Tees. October is back to school for Frankie Files podcast. For back to school, my guests and I will dive in to how education is twisted around religion for teen and young adults. Whether recruited on campus, having their education choices limited, we will explore this in episode 36 through 39. Tabitha Chapman, Andrew Pleasure, Ryan Hernandez, and Sari Crawford make up our very special October back to school focus. Stay tuned. Today, our special guest is Ryan from the Truth That Heals podcast. You can find his podcast on Anchor, and it's about cults, trauma, and healing. In the beginning, the episodes are testimonials and may have explicit language. Now he's having more guests and others to talk about their religious abuse and their journey towards healing. Ryan Hernandez was in California when he was recruited into serving on a Catholic mission. His life was forever changed over the next 11 years, and now he's got a lot to say. I'm glad to bring this episode to you. The name of the community operating with Friar Being is AHFI, Alliance of the Holy Family International. The name of the division Ryan was in was Oath. Oblate Apostles of the Two Hearts of Jesus and Mary. Oath was responsible for trafficking him and for many other abuses, including financial, including physical. Today, listen to Ryan on the topic of Catholic cults. Trigger warning. Some people may find topics discussed in this episode difficult. Please proceed with caution.
Well, I started the podcast maybe almost a year ago. However, it started more off as like a testimonial, getting it off my chest, all of the damage that happened to me in the cult that I was in. Right. Because upon leaving, other ex-members, they didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to... It's like everything that I was saying to ex-members, they were saying that, hey, pretend it didn't happen, just move on. Since it is called The Truth That Heals, first I wanted to kind of be vulnerable with the audience and be like, hey, this is my story, this is who I am. And eventually later on, as it's developing, I would love to hear other people's truths, other people's stories. So that's the route that my podcast is going, and that's why it's called The Truth That Heals. You were saying earlier that, that silent treatment, it's hard. It's like, where am I going to get some kind of a support team if no one else is accepting these truths?
I like the feel of it. I've already listened to several episodes. In your case, we're dealing with Catholicism, right?
Yes, Catholicism.
Well, I'd like to tell the story of how your family was involved and how you got signed up for this particular program and walk people through it as you learned about it.
Some of my views have obviously changed. My family was not involved in the cult realm. And the thing is that with some groups, there is like just this normalcy, but once you get in deeper, there is this crazy cult system that's in place. And I think from, looking back, because my parents would give money and it seemed like you're supporting a righteous thing, a righteous movement. And the goal of the movement was to help families. One of the missions that they would do was like they'd help families who are like on the brink of divorce, kind of to like sit down and talk and maybe try to, bring some kind of peace or bring some kind of agreements. And that's what the missionaries would do. That's what I would do later on. However, because it is a religious group, and for those who are familiar with the Catholicism and the way it works, there is like the military, how you have Air Force, you have the Marines. In Catholicism, you have different religious identities, which could be like the Franciscans, who focus more on poverty. You have the Jesuits, who focus on, I think, teaching, and there's so many different identities that you can take. And so the community that I took still is relatively new in the Catholic organization. So they did come off as very straightforward, very Catholic. But once I got in and once I was deep into it, there were so many secrets that I saw that was being kept from our families, being kept from the rest of the church. And there was this the same tactics of manipulation, of gaslighting, of taking advantage of the person's young age. Because me, I was 16. There were other people who joined at 15.
And I'm going to stop you there. You were 16 and living what part of the country? California, right?
I was in Cali. Yeah, I was in California. I was in near Long Beach area, I think.
Long Beach in the house. And then where did they take you? Like when you entered the program, where did you go?
They've been approved to stay in the Los Angeles diocese. And the thing is that many people who follow the group didn't know what was happening, was that they had been kicked out because of some shady things that had been happening in their leadership and that other members before me had already complained about. And we didn't know about it. So they're functioning in LA in secret. And then I got invited to a retreat in Omaha where they were invited. I mean, where they were approved to stay. I was happy, just the calmness and the farms and everything. I really enjoyed it. I was there for a retreat, and they grabbed onto the opportunity, and it's like, hey, you want to join? I don't know if other people here who have been in cults have experienced that hypnotic look, and that look is like, hey, you have a call to join us, so you need to come and follow. And so I was like, oh damn, this guy is a holy person, so I might as well leave everything. So I did. I left everything, joined, and then I turned 17, and then I was sent to Delaware. In Catholicism, there is this thing called religious groups, religious orders. And, I think people are more familiar with nuns. So typically you join a congregation or a convent, and then you take vows. It's supposed to be a very prayerful spiritual journey. If you're in one community, let's say you're in Nebraska, you're under one superior. If I get sent to Delaware, I'm under another superior. However, we always go back to the founder, who is a man he's a priest, but his main base was at that time in the Philippines. Because in the way of formation for religious communities, these are terms that people probably aren't familiar with. When you join in a religious community, it's called the postulant. That's the time where you just kind of, get to stay with them, kind of learn the ins and outs of the community. Then there's the novitiate. The novitiate is like the boot camp. That's the time where you learn the prayer life, you learn the structure, you learn the rules and the Constitution. And then there is what's called temporary vows. I'm not sure if anyone has watched the documentary The Keepers on Netflix, but they talk about temporary vows where, like a nun, she'll take the vows of chastity, poverty, and obedience, but only for a temporary time. And after that set time, you're allowed to leave, you're allowed to stay, you're given that freedom to choose. However, in my community, that freedom was taken away. And it's like, well, they'll say, we're not taking away your freedom. You can leave whenever you want. God's not going to love you. You're going to be punished. You're going to be cursed. Enjoy your damnation for eternity. So
gaslighting.
It was very manipulative. Gaslighting, exactly.
Yep. You're a bad person if you leave, but you have free will, don't worry. So they leveled you up with some manipulation, and then what happened after the Delaware location?
After Delaware, we went to the Philippines. However, we got kicked out again by another bishop, and as this is happening, we're getting kicked out by different places. The way our priests and the way our founder would kind of present it is this is the end times, the great persecution, and this is just proof that we are offering something holy, so we need to stand firm. So we would go about dressed up as students because our mentality is they're like Freemasons in the church and they're out to kill us, they're going to hunt us down. So we have to go incognito to reach the people in different cities.
So they're already teaching you a lot of apocalypticism, which is as old as time, by the way, Jesus' time. That was used to spread the word that, Jesus was the Savior. Apocalypticism, the world's going to end. Fear-mongering, very popular in religion. Mm-hmm. But gosh, you're already kind of living this odd secret life. You've been kicked out. You were probably wondering, wait a minute, if we're all in the same Catholicism, why are we getting kicked out by other bishops? I bet that was a red flag there.
It wasn't a red flag because I have been trained, like we're trained to have complete, okay, now getting into vows, there are 3 degrees of obedience. The first one is obedience. First degree, I think it's of judgment, where you surrender your judgment. The will, you surrender your will, and then you surrender your complete reason. However, they took it up a notch, and there's this term that they coined. It's the 4th degree of obedience. So the mentality is many people, Christians, Catholics, and followers of God have died miserable deaths, or you can say martyrdoms. If they were willing to die for Christ, you must be willing to die to yourself. So there's this thing that they put up called 4th degree of obedience. And although I didn't do this intense form of obedience, I know other victims that did. And what happened was, this is hard to say because it's members were told, okay, for your obedience, for your martyrdom, you have to eat feces. You have to either yours or someone else's. The mentality is, if you don't, then it's okay, like you're not humble.
Terrible.
I know members who were forced to do it.
Holy shit.
I knew that some had. You're trained to be like a militant. I'm going to get the job done. I'm going to be like the Terminator. You're going to get the job done. Whatever the obedience is. No sleep, no food, whatever. Let's do it.
When you go to the Philippines, what was the structure change?
It is like a boot camp. However, different superiors. It is a religious community. However, I feel that it's been hijacked by cult-like members. During that time, it was really confusing because I would have superiors who would really focus on charity, spend your time in prayer, on studying, and doing things, normal. And then they'd be sent somewhere else, or they'd be sent to a mission or something. And then I get another superior who would be like, I'll give you an example. Because for us, like our sleep was like from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. We had very little sleep, and we're kneeling for like 6-7 hours, praying from 3 in the morning to like 10 a.m. And the idea that the superior would give is, if someone next to you is falling asleep, it's like, well, because there's like 40 of us. So if a person anywhere in the room, in the chapel, is sleepy, you have to slap them to wake them up. If you don't do it, then you're disobedient and you're not following God. I'm trained to be hardcore. So I go and I slap someone, and then I go back to my place in the chapel, and then I'd fall asleep. Someone would slap me, and then I'm pissed off. You can't fight back.
Sleep deprivation and food deprivation really messes with your mind.
It does. It does.
I remember it gets you in this weird twilight zone. Your reality is upside down, and you just start ignoring the signals like, I gotta eat. I gotta sleep. Nope, ignore that. I could see how effective that must have been.
You're listening to The Frankie Files. FrankieFilesPodcast.com.
You talked about misappropriation of funds a little bit. Was there something there in the Philippines?
I think I realized about the funds kind of later on. Towards the end, the 11 years is like all in one little ball, because I'm getting older in profession within the community. So you're expected to, and they give you all these checklists. There's like unlimited checklists. And one of the things is you need to train on how to be a recruiter and how to procure money to keep the ball rolling in the community. I remember once I procured money from my family in the U.S. I picked it up through Western Union. The role is you're supposed to surrender everything you get. But I was hungry. I mean, I hadn't eaten. I hadn't, really drank anything. So I went to McDonald's. I had like a small apple pie, hash browns in the Philippines. But there are spies. So someone reported it. And the one who reported, I know who did it, son of a gun. He reported it. And the funny thing is that he was also at McDonald's eating, but because he's an older member, superior member, it's okay for him. When I got snitched on, I had to go through a beating. And, beatings were normal. You have to, you get flagellated. We would have these whips, and they're like ropes. We make these ropes, and at the end of the ropes, we make knots. With a candle or with the flame, we would kind of melt the fabric so that we melt it a bit and then let it dry so it gets really hard and thick. So, our t-shirts would be bloody, our knees would be all bloody. So this guy snitched on me, and then I'm getting this public humiliation. And at this time, I'm already in my 10th year, and that was finally when I kind of stood up and I told the superior, why am I getting beating? This doesn't make sense. And his response, and this isn't in front of everybody, in front of all the brothers. His response was, that just shows how much you love God. You're not gonna, take your penance. So it put me in a position where it's like I gotta take it, because it's like, yeah, I do love God. So I'm finally seeing the red flags, but I was still under submission, if that makes sense. I'm not against penance. I think that sometimes, a little penance, maybe you want to skip a meal and maybe spend time in prayer and maybe meditate. Go ahead, do that. But when it becomes abusive and you're abusing yourself and you're making people, one member told me her experience of, they told her, you're not good enough to do the 4th degree because you're so proud. You're not holy. So what we're going to do is we're going to humble you down. That kind of take you off your pedestal. And so for morning prayers, you're going to have poop smeared on your face and you got to keep it there.
This is schizophrenic stuff.
Thank you, Ryan, for sharing your story so far. That does sound really horrifying. I guess my question for you is I hear that you kind of had this revelation that when they called you out for eating McDonald's and punished you was wildly inappropriate. I was wondering, did you ever have any pang of guilt when you saw other members being harshly punished? Or were you just so wrapped up in that system or that cult that you understood that their punishment was in a sense them serving God?
That's a good question. I'm gonna have to go back in time to maybe 2006 or 7. I was in Laguna, Philippines, because in the novitiate there were 40 or 50 of us, and we'd be in groups. And I guess my group, I think we were the liturgy group, I guess we did some mistakes. So for our punishment, we had to flagellate, to whip each other, I think 50, 60 times, I don't remember. And I remember it was hard for us because we were still kind of new to that mentality of the beatings. Of the slappings was one thing, but self-flagellation was another. But beating someone else was different. So I remember my novice, I don't want to say my novice master, but the one after the novice master, the assistant to the novice master, he kind of prepped us. He was saying, okay, I know this is difficult, but try to imagine, Jesus when he took the scourging. There had to be the Roman soldiers. They had to do it because Jesus loved us and he allowed it. So as you're beating your brother, just imagine you're taking the role of the soldier for Christ, and so it kind of there was guilt, but it's you have to bury it at that moment and take over, and and I went hard. They'd go hard on you.
The thing I'd like to interject there about the cruelty mentally of that is they got you to turn on yourself. You don't believe in that, and then you're doing it because God, #because God. We've all been through, as the survivor, we've all been through that moment where you betray yourself. I think that's their biggest cruelty, is when we turn on ourselves and what we would never do. But that coercive moment, I mean, you have no choice unless you're going to run out into the Philippine forest right then and there and leave. That's the position we're put in.
And it was so hard. And my brothers afterwards, they asked me, like, hey, like, did you feel good doing it? I said, absolutely not. And I asked them, how did you feel? And they also gave me the same answer. We felt miserable. But after that conversation, you have to bury it. And you forget all about it, and you just move forward, pretending it never happens. And since then, I've made peace with these people.
One of the reasons you went to this program, accepted the rules, etc., is that your brother had been through the similar mission, and he didn't have the same experience. He thought it would be safe.
Yeah, my brother joined before me for a few years, and the way that he had it, he was already, I think, 22, 23. He was more of an adult, and for him, it was like a free ride to travel the world. And, you know, me and my brother, we grew up in Catholic school, so we knew already like the foundations of Catholicism, and you know, him being older, and he was good looking. Like, he was offered a role on MTV, and he went for this. He was telling me later that, because I was sharing with him my stories, my experience. And it was different because in his time, it wasn't really as structured as a religious group. It was more structured as just like missionary kind of catechesis. So he'd be sent to like Ireland, Africa, Italy, Germany. For him, he was saying, like, he always wanted to leave. When he would bring that up, hey, I think I'm going to leave, they would say, oh, we'll pay for your trip to Ireland. So he said, well, free ride to Ireland? It doesn't compare to my story because it's like two different worlds.
That realization that, you know, you are shaking down your parents for money that you don't get a cent of just to take care of basic needs.
I mean, I was in the Philippines, and your communication with the outside world is very limited. They had that expectation that I was being taken care of because Father Bing, he would travel all over the freaking world. And he would be telling, you know, the followers, hey, we need money for them. We need them to, you know, have the basic needs. And he'd use that money to travel and he'd make new houses and keep on recruiting. Families didn't know this until recently, a few years ago, when the Vatican got involved and kind of kicked him out of the community.
So there's 50 people in your particular group. How many people and how many locations are we talking about doing this?
Okay, so in a compound, like in a compound, I might be in, let's say, for example, because as I got older, I had more of a position. So let's say I was now I'm the novice assistant, the novice master. In my community of novices, there could be 50. And then in another building, you have the professed members who've taken their vows. You have another like 150. So all together in one compound, you could have like 300 to 400. And then down the street, you have the compound for sisters who are like another 400. And they're also broken up. So altogether, we're about 1,000 in the Philippines. And in America, about probably 25. And then we had houses in Australia, which probably had 15 brothers and 15 sisters and about 2.
What's the name of it, may I ask? Or is that something you talk about?
So the name of like the whole thing was Alliance of the Holy Family International. And the name of my community of the like the branch of military that I was in, we're called the Oath. And that stands for Oblate of the Two Hearts, you know, representing the two hearts of Jesus and Mary. I felt later on, like towards the end, that they were yearning for the separation from the cult leaders and were more transparent with families. So confusing because I see this pull and shove of powers where there's like this dark side wanting to have complete control, wanting to like abuse and manipulate. And then I see this other power where it's like, hey, like if you want to leave, you know, we'll support you. It was just so confusing. We were taught to have extremism, to beat yourself up. And then you have this other group where it's like charity should be the main thing, kindness, forgiveness. So it was, the confusion was like, who do I follow? Because in the cult mentality, they were looking at these other members who were trying to be more faithful to their vows. They were looking at them as if they were weak, soft, sissies. Oh, you don't want to be a martyr. And so that's why we did have a split. And then the alliance, the way that they're running now is very like under the radar. They're still doing all of the apocalyptic things. While the other group, they're reaching out to ex-members saying, hey, we're sorry, we're trying to learn how we can fix things. That was that confusion for me. And I don't hate the oath. I don't hate the Oblated Apostles, because I do see that they have the guts to, reach out, and they're not trying to do that cult stuff anymore. It's just, just being like sitting down and listening to people. While the other group, I did try to communicate with them, and, they shunned me, called me an a-hole. What they told me afterwards was, I have to be quiet. If I say anything, it's a sin. I'm going to go to hell.
There you go.
So they're saying that, while the other group is saying, hey, you have the right to speak the truth.
That line of be quiet or you go to hell, evangelical threat of any naysayer is so common, is their thing. The people, that I know were survivors of the cult. I was in Morning Land. Like, there's no major books or stories, and I know so many lives that were destroyed, and I know it's the fear that keeps us silent, and it keeps us silent forever in some cases, right? You were in for how many years?
11.
Yeah, so I was same, 12.
Damn.
And when you leave, you start to re-examine your own behaviors, your own what you learned there, and try to unleash it from your brain because it wasn't healthy. But that whole gaslighting and that pressure and that peer pressure, living in that 24/7, your food's controlled, your sex is controlled, your time, your information checks all the boxes of a cult. So sorry you had that experience, Ryan.
I wish it didn't happen. Of course, I missed out on high school. I had to leave high school.
I was dropped out of high school too, so I missed the final years of high school due to my master's request.
I did do, in a religious community, you're supposed to have education. That's what the church wants. You get an education and you get degrees. But what Father Bing did, the founder of this community, was he made his own school through the Philippines, and they would make all these loopholes. And because I was a foreigner, I did my philosophy. And at the end, on graduation day, it's like, sorry, you can't go up for the graduation ceremony. I'm like, well, why not? Well, because you're a foreigner, so it's not really legit, because we're kind of cheating the system here. So it really just messed me up. They set you up for failure. And so when I left, I'm this guy with no education. I did education. I did get a philosophy degree. You could say a bachelor's degree in philosophy. But yet, I don't have a high school diploma. Papers there are not even legit. So it was just so
robbing you of time you put in.
And my parents are spending money thinking I'm getting the best formation, thinking everything is nice. So earlier you asked me if my parents were involved in the cult. Yeah, they were involved, but not in the cult system that was there, because they're left out of that.
Okay, Alliance of the Holy Family International. If you can explain it to us.
Okay, so in religious communities, so that's the name of the movement for the lay people. Lay people meaning those who aren't priests, those who just go to regular church on Sunday. That's the name of the movement, geared to focus on them. Once you join to the religious life, there are different names, different communities. And mine was Oblated Apostles of the Two Hearts. And then you have others, there's 6 other groups. So it's...
one of the things I like to make sure and do is to, simple activism, just letting people know a dangerous section. Obviously, some of the sects are dangerous. And if it's 10 years, 11 years of your life spent and emotionally and physically tortured, not going to recommend that.
The oath that I was in, I'm working with them now on, reaching out to others, and, I'm also giving them my complaints. So I'm not smearing them, and I hope no one goes and attacks them, because at least they're doing something. Okay. So I'm going to give them the props on that. There's 6 groups in that community, and some did go with Father Bing, and the others did, remain, I guess, faithful to the Vatican. Well, those who went with Father Bing, they're still stuck in like manipulation, but they changed their name, so I don't even know what they're going off as anymore.
Brian, that's what they all do. It's crazy with this. They get the handbook, the cult handbook. When something goes south, change your name and relocate. Boom. Use cash only. The name change is the same thing my cult did. They just changed their name to the monastery in Long Beach. Still a city block.
Okay.
But it's clear that they want to live forever. They want to keep the grift going. And it sounds like your father, Bing, figured out how to amass. I bet he's amassed a wealth. Who knows, right?
Well, I just discovered like maybe a few weeks ago that before he did my group, the Obedient Apostles of the Two Hearts, he did other groups before that. But as he was getting deep into it, and I guess his greed and all this, the Vatican stopped him. And then he goes and does it somewhere else, and that's his MO. Once Vatican strips him of being superior of a community, he goes, all right, I'm just going to make another community so he can be always on top.
And allows him to do that.
I'm in communication with a friend in the Vatican who actually is kind of inviting me to go over there to, do some reports, because no one talks. No one says anything, and then this creep is doing the same thing, but what people say is, oh, he's a holy guy, so nothing is done about it. Mine, he does work in the Vatican, has invited me, hey, either write a letter or come here yourself. I would love to go to Italy.
Dang.
You're listening to The Frankie Files, frankiefilespodcast.com.
I'm not going to question anyone's beliefs, where I have definitely questioned God since God was used against me to separate my family. It does make me consider myself a skeptic of religion. But what I love about your situation is so unique, is you're doing activism in the church so that other young people don't get hurt. This is almost like a borderline troubled teen industry story. Follow the teachings, to subordinate to their program, to help, to do outreach, and you were subjugated to something so different than what should be going on. And the parents trust these organizations,
There's an absolute trust. And if you lack trust, it's like, well, you're not trusting God. I know that there are members, ex-members from my community who are, they're homosexual or they're, no longer Catholic, and they're doing their own thing. And people got mad at me at first. It's like, why are you talking to them? It's like, well, I'd rather talk to them than talk to you. And then they get offended and say, well, why you got to be like that? I'm like, well, why do you got to be like that? I mean, they're human beings. You believe in God, right? So what gives you the authority to be a prick? And so I
think you got your self-esteem back.
For the first few years after talking to Father Bing, and he told me, you better keep your mouth shut or else you're going to, go to hell. I was in fear, but then I did do counseling to rewire my mind, have that drive of, so I'm trying to be a resilient.
That all-pervasive fear, it just creeps into your bones. And you're thinking, wait, something's going to get me. It's a paranoia they put on us to accomplish the fear-mongering, to get what they want, right? If you're not in fear, those 50 people could run them up. So they simply use it to, as Dr. Lalish is speaking about in her book, a system of control. It's interesting when you said that you were in pairs. She talks about this in this book I'm reading, Bounded Choice, and the Heaven's Gate cult did that. And a lot of religions and cults do it, is they pair us with someone that will keep us in line, keep each other in line. It's a lazy way of controlling people, because the leader knows they can't really control you if you don't believe. Do you remember that moment when you was like, this is wrong? I no longer buy this.
I didn't have that moment. However, I did speak to other religious members from other communities. In LA, I actually got permitted to go to my brother's wedding in Los Angeles under condition that I bring another brother with me. So my family paid for both our tickets. And then I get to LA, the sisters and Father Bing are accusing me of being disobedient.
You are given permission to go to the family wedding, which I know all about missing family events. Same. I get it. They do that. So like you're their property. But you can only go if you take a spy/guard to keep you in line. You go with that demand and the parents accommodate. You go there and then they double back and blame you of something anyway.
So to break it down, so in the community that I was in at the time in the Philippines, I was with one of the good superiors. Okay. And so it was broken down to him that, hey, like I have permission to go. He doesn't send me one of those spy brothers. He sends me like a friend of mine whom I've known even from before the community. We're like best friends. So it was like perfect. All right, so I'll go with him. Yeah. And then we have a cell phone that we've been given. And then we're getting messages that the bad sisters have found out that I'm in America for the wedding. And they're saying, hey, we're here with Father Bing. And Father Bing is pissed off. He's saying that you never had permission, that you're lying, you're being attached to your family. And, that was never allowed. So as this is happening, like my mind is spiraling because then they use like the golden words, which is your obedience is to go back. And once, for me, obedience, like I said before, you're like a martyr. Obedience, you take obedience, to the death. So once they told me your obedience from Father Bing is to go home and not go to the wedding, I was ready to do so. But the only thing was I didn't have any money. So I stayed for the wedding. But after the wedding, I spoke to a religious nun from another community that isn't cultish. And she gave me some advice, which kind of opened my eyes that something was wrong, but I never wanted to accept it. And I'm not sure if other survivors have gone through this where you're presented with the truth, but you don't want to look at it because you've hold on, you've cherished this reality for so long. That's what happened to me. I only ended up leaving later.
How long later after that wedding?
A year and a half, maybe 2 years max.
Not bad. About that moment you were just talking about, I've recently started telling my mom, I think it feels like the gambler's syndrome. So the gambler's syndrome goes like this. Well, I've invested all this money in, if I walk away from this slot machine, this card table, whatever now, I won't win it back. Instead of saying, I have invested this much time and this much money and I have no return on my investment, it's time to cut. The feeling is false. It's fake. The feeling that you should stay because you believe everything that you're indoctrinated, but it's a trick. It's a trick. It's not even accurate.
Like you're saying, all that time you spent. But like I'm being faced with reality. So I did ask permission. Hey, like I've been here for so long. I'm done with my vows. I'm ready to leave. And it was like, no, you got to stay. You got to be obedient. Just pray about it. So no matter how many times you ask to leave, you're going to get either punished or they're going to put you on silence. So what I did in the end was I had to get a girlfriend and just take care of business, and they kicked me out. I didn't know what to do. Like I didn't want to. For me, like I was a virgin. So it's like I didn't want to just sleep with any chick. So I got, I got with the teacher from the college, and we were dating at first. And it's like, hey guys, I tell like superior, I'm kind of, dating a little bit, and it's like, oh, you just do penance. And I wanted to leave, and they didn't get that. So I had to close the deal, and then that I did it. They're like, all right, you're not getting permission to leave. You've been kicked out for nice. So it's like, all right. It was like a spiritual rape where I've given so much, but then it's like I have to do this to leave. I mean, I enjoyed it. Shoot, it was my first time.
Well, you are a red-blooded male.
I was like, I was killing myself.
You were trafficked all over the tarnation. You were in L.A. and then you were in Nebraska. And Delaware.
Then I went to
Philippines.
Back to Delaware. Puerto Rico. Back to Delaware. And then in Delaware, we do missions like in New York or like in Pennsylvania, Maryland, things like that.
You were in 8 places
I mean, well, I was in a few places, yeah, but you're there for like a 2-day thing, 3 days. In Puerto Rico, I was there for like 5 days. I got in trouble for yelling back at a sister, so I came back to Delaware to do. They gave me solitary confinement for like 3 months. Yeah, well, in a total, I did about a year and a half of solitary confinement. My first time in solitary confinement was, I think it was from 2010 to 2011 or 2011 to 2012. That was for a year.
That is horrible. Tell me what it entails. Sensory deprivation is one of the largest tortures you can get. It's extreme.
So the thing is, I mean, they wouldn't call it solitary confinement. And, you know, for the longest time, I wasn't accepting it. I could sleep in my old room. Sleeping hours are from 10 p.m. to 12:45 a.m. Then they wake you up, and then I have to be in the chapel all day from 12:45 a.m. back to like 9:30 p.m. And then they'll leave my food outside the chapel, my drinks. And so I'm in there all day. And what they're trying to do is like make you pray. I guess make you pray the evil out of you. I don't know. It sucked. So I did a year, and then I get sent.
And how much contact with another person did you have during that year?
Well, the superior who made that decision, whenever he would leave for mission, the other superior who was like the vicar, the one next, he would come and visit me, and the brothers would visit me like once a month, if ever, or like once every 2 weeks. And that was like a break, and he knew that I needed a break. But once the other guy came in, it's like, okay, back to following the rules, and, you know, we don't know you.
Well, yours was really extreme with the physical beating and the isolation.
And that's why I had to do therapy.
You sound great, Ryan. That's a lot of work you've been doing on yourself.
And doing a lot of work, you know, on Twitter and on Reddit. You know, I see so much support. I mean, you feel so alone once you get out of that community, out of that cult. What the hell just happened to me? But like going, like, you know, meeting people like you and, you know, the listeners who reach out, it's like, all right, you know, there's hope out there.
There is. 17 to 28.
Yeah, correct. So I left when I turned 20, I think right before I turned 29. Now I'm 35. Now I'm an old man.
That's what a survivor is taking that, trying to prevent someone else from having this experience. It's interesting to compare notes. I love it. For me, that's really been healing. You know, because even though I was in a New Age church, so many things you just said happened. I mean, isolation is a torture that, if you're social, it really bugs you. Tell us about your podcast. What type of topics are you handling on there? What are you putting on your podcast?
So I kind of just did it like almost like a diary kind of thing, where I just tell my story, and actually people listened, and I enjoy talking. So, you know, the solitary confinement really sucked and it pissed me off. And now that I have a platform, you know, I use it more as a journal. To like my first few, you know, so many episodes, it's been more like, you know, a testimony. And sometimes I still do that. However, like I said earlier, I want to invest more time reaching out to other people. And now that I've introduced myself to the audience, I'm open to listening to other people's truths. Interviewed a guy from my community. He was only there for 3 months, but then he left because he felt so much pressure, for one thing, and he ended up getting on Catholic Match. And the thing is that he ended up finding a sister from our community. So he got married, and, you know, I haven't told his story. And but I'm open to hearing other people's, not just trauma, because I know trauma exists everywhere. I mean, I'm open to hearing people's traumas, but also, you know, like, what's the healing factor? Like, what was what was it that helped them to get out of it, so that other listeners can, you know, learn something? So, well, that's how it's developing so far, but we'll see how the podcast goes. I'm leaving for Ireland actually in a few weeks to meet up with ex-members from my community, setting up a reunion, and maybe I'll do a podcast on that, ex-members. So we'll see. It's a journey, and I'm just getting started.
The name of the podcast on Anchor and Spotify is Truth That Heals.
Truth That Heals.
That's where they can find you.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this opportunity.
I learned a lot about the missions and the Catholicism and the way that the cult kind of infiltrated what was going on. It's funny how they all use the same playbook.
But like the more we talk about it, the more aware people are. And some people are pissed off
sure.
when we're talking about it, but like, hey, whatever.
Well, to all the haters, just say, hey, love you too, man. I'll get you to question and I'll get you to examine. Ryan, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Thank you so much, Frankie.
If you would like information on cults in the news, please join my new Substack, frankietees.substack.com. You're listening to The Frankie Files, frankiefilespodcast.com.